Thanks for checking out our video. Feel free to join our free weekly newsletter called Pop Culture Annotated, and also join our Discord server to talk with us and others that share your fandom in pop culture entertainment. Links in the description. Hey everybody, how's it going? So when Zack Snyder's Man of Steel released in the theaters, it marked a new direction for the character. And I remember myself, sitting to the theater watching with my friends, and I loved it. When I first saw it, I gave it a 9 out of 10 upon further reflection and stuff like that, just because I was in that post-movie high. I really did enjoy it, and the biggest thing for me was I liked that they were embracing and showing more of his alien side, instead of treating him as like some sort of ambiguous demigod-like figure. Now on the surface, there are a lot of changes to Superman, such as him no longer sporting the red trunks, while also Superman himself in a live-action portrayal having a body akin to a bodybuilder versus a swimmer, because outside of the comics, usually when he was on live action, he was a lot leaner than the Henry Cavill Superman, so that was also a change just visually itself. And although this did fit with Zack Snyder's vision for the character and the movie itself, one thing I found interesting was that Zack Snyder is asking the audience to go deeper than a simple good versus evil storyline. And this was present in Man of Steel, with the major theme of it being the debate of nature versus nurture. Now on Krypton, the next generation of citizens are genetically designed and programmed to fit a certain role in society. And this is why Kal-El, aka Superman, is very special from the start of the film, as he's the result of the first natural birth in many generations of Krypton. This gives Kal-El the ability and opportunity to not have his life predetermined by his genetics, thus providing him free will. And this comes to play many times throughout his life as he journeys to discover who he wants to be in the world versus simply following a predetermined route, unlike Zod. And this is also kind of the cause of the different teasers that we got from Man of Steel, one voiceover by Jor-El and one voiceover by Jonathan Kent, where they talk about that, basically one arguing for kind of basically more of the nurture route and one arguing more for like the nature route. It's very interesting, and it's something that definitely I enjoyed watching in this film. Now with Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Snyder introduced different themes and other concepts as characters such as Batman and Lex Luthor entered the narrative. Now out of the many themes present, the theme that interested me was kind of the whole God versus man angle. Now others interpret it overall as a commentary on power and absolute power, which still kind of checks the same boxes off with my remarks. Now when talking about God versus man, the movie does a very blatant job of showing you how people across the world view Superman as a savior type figure. On the other side of perspectives, Lex Luthor and Batman to a certain extent view Superman as not only a powerful figure, but as more of a god unable to do all good. And Lex even says that an all-powerful god cannot be all good. So Lex doesn't think humanity basically can join the gods in the sun, which is in itself a contradiction to something that Jor-El tells Kal-El about basically leading humanity towards the sun, which in itself is a callback to All-Star Superman. And because of this, Lex is determined to bring the quote-unquote gods down to his level, or you can interpret it as bringing the gods down to the level of man by finding their flaws. Now characters like Batman also became insecure as he began to feel powerless in the world of gods amongst men, which references itself to Alfred's line about the fever and all that stuff. And it's interesting to see Batman and Lex start with essentially the same viewpoint towards Superman, aiming to make him appear less godly, yet at the end of the day, Batman ends up seeing the error of his ways and changes accordingly. Now another interesting thing to me about the Zack Snyder kind of franchise, which is partially overlooked by some fans, is the importance of Lois Lane's character. In Man of Steel, she's the first human outside of Clark's family to essentially not distrust him or view him as a freak, and instead comes to love him and know him, and eventually they fall in love. So by the time we watch Batman v Superman, Lois is the emotional core of who Clark is today. This is highlighted when Clark sees a vision of his father, Jonathan Kent. During the vision, Jonathan tells him the story of how he had lost faith in the world after getting put in the position where he decided between saving his farm and the Lang's farm. And Jonathan had a very pessimistic view of the world after that moment until he meets Martha, who becomes his joy and overall light in the darkness, so to speak. And this relates to Clark, as Lois not only becomes that, but also more of his tether to humanity and who he is outside of his mother. Now, Lois was there also and helped him on his journey to become Superman from day one, which is likely what kept Clark going after a bad day. Now we enter the details. Zack Snyder recently confirmed about the original version of Justice League before Warner Brothers demanded rewrites. And in this version, Darkseid was able to kill Lois Lane, suggested also to be pregnant, which caused Superman to become vulnerable to the anti-life equation. Now others are also saying that the anti-life equation was also in him the whole time through the Codex. Just in general, he became vulnerable to corruption from the anti-life equation. That's the general thing to take away here. Superman ends up becoming a powerful enforcer for Darkseid. Now in the comics, the anti-life equation is a mathematical formula that allows the user to eliminate the free will of any sentient being, and the full formula is loneliness plus alienation plus fear plus despair plus self-worth divided by mockery divided by condemnation divided by misunderstanding times guilt times shame times failure times judgment, where n equals y, where y equals hope and n equals folly, love equals lies, life equals death, and self equals Darkseid. When reviewing each part of the equation, it's interesting to note that Zack Snyder essentially introduced each part of that to Superman throughout his Man of Steel story arc, including the concept of free will. And having Superman controlled by Darkseid with the anti-life equation, in a way, is kind of ironic. Now, there are early reports that Darkseid desires Superman, as I said before, because the Codex in his body was the key to either unlocking or at least completing what he needed for the anti-life equation. There's no full confirmation on this I could find, but having Superman confront each aspect of the anti-life equation in order to eventually defy it would have brought thematic satisfaction to the character's journey in a lot of ways, as defeating Darkseid and everything he stands for would have basically made him have to reclaim himself. And through that, he would find who he wants to be in the world fully, thus ending the movie with Superman fully embracing who he is alongside of a fully formed Justice League. In a way, this would have marked a very nice new era moment for the character and the DCEU as a whole, as they could have started the narrative fresh from there. And also, it's worth mentioning that in this new timeline where Superman breaks out of Darkseid's control, Lois doesn't die in that one. But comment below your guys' thoughts. What do you guys think about this? Would you have liked this journey for the DCEU Superman? Leave your thoughts down below, and we'll see you guys next time.